In this video, we're going to take a look at Gold Clip, but before we get started, my name is Ed, you're watching Stokes Sounds, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment, and if you want to support the channel, head over to our website, stokesounds.com. Now let's dive in. So I've got a track pulled up here. Today we're just going to be looking at drums, because we're going to be looking at Gold Clip. Now personally for me, when it comes down to clipping, I tend to use it on more transient stuff. So kind of you want to clip the transients. That's what, clipping is. It's shaving the peaks, so it enables us to kind of get louder, and it makes the limiter work less, which overall reduces the amount of distortion you get when you hit that kind of -6 LUFS integrated and get super loud basically. So as well as clipping enabling us to get loud, we can also use it for a saturation purpose. When something sounds clipped, it can have a sound, whether it's soft clip or hard clip. Usually I go for hard clip because hard clip is less saturation than it is with soft clip. So if I am doing kind of more transparent clipping that I want, I'll go for more of a hard clip. I've got Gold Clip pulled up just because it is my favorite clipper and it's one that I use a lot. When it comes down to my workflow, I tend to put clipping on three main things: kicks, drum bus, and the mix bus. Sometimes I'll put them on snares as well, just depends. You got to be careful because, as I said, it can change the sound a little bit, so a lot of it's just a tasting and you just have to go with vibe and what works for you. But the technical part of why I'm clipping is partially to get louder and obviously to control those peaks going into my final limiter. So if we take a look at the overall plugin itself, you can see here we've got the bypass, unbypass. Again, that can turn off the clipper and turn it on, so it just enables us to kind of A/B test when we do it. Then we've got the box tone. You can see we can select through classic or modern or just keep it flat. Again, depends if you want to change the tone. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. And then we've got different clippers. As I said earlier, we can do hard clip, but in this case we've got classic, modern, and hard. So you can see it's kind of classic is more soft, then you've got modern, which is slightly different curve, and then you've got hard, which is just a complete harder clip. And you can see here in the corner on the clipper they've added this low pass filter. Now the low pass filter is really cool because sometimes when you clip it can sound quite harsh, it can sound quite cold and brittle, and by putting the low pass filter in, you're taming that high end, allowing it to kind of be less aggressive, more tamed, and a bit smoother overall. So that is a really cool feature they've added in on Gold Clip. And then you've got the gold section here, which is again is a different kind of tonal things, which is related to this feature here, which we can turn up. And to be honest, this gold, I'm not really sure what the ins and outs of this plugin is doing because it's incredible, but this is like a loudness thing. It just allows me to have perceived loudness without it changing on the meters, which is really, really cool. Everyone wants these tracks to be super loud, want to be louder than each other, the whole loudness war thing, and having this feature here is one of those little tricks that I have up my sleeve that just enables me to get the overall mix loud and competitive. And again, you can change the sound of that slightly with the modern and the classic. Again, play around, see what works for you. And then over here we've got the alchemy feature. Not 100% sure what it's actually doing behind the plugin, but it kind of mellows the top end. It kind of makes it not so harsh. So I like to use that sometimes if I feel like something's a little bit sharp in the mix, or I kind of just want to tame that kind of mid to high range. I'll bring in a bit of this alchemy, just a little bit, just again to taste. And then you can see here how much we're clipping, oversampling, linear phase, very kind of standard stuff, wet and dry. What I like to do though when it comes down to actually using the clipper itself is if I have, let's say, my drums and there's a lot of voltage going into the drum bus, in this case I've got it on the drum bus, sometimes what I'll do is I'll hit this button here, and this links the in and the out. So if I bring this up, you can see it goes in and it takes it out, so it means we're matching the volume levels. But let's say I've got a very kind of low voltage going into the mix bus. What I can do is bring the ceiling down here, and I'm still getting clipping, but it's just different way of gain staging, and the plugin kind of acts differently and how much of the gold goes into it depending on how much I'm bringing down the ceiling vs how much I'm increasing the dB level going into the plugin. So again, it's just different ways of doing it. They both achieve the same thing of clipping or whatever you're trying to do, but again, if it's a low signal, I'll bring the ceiling down. If it's a high signal, I'll just bring it up on the actual clipper itself. Usually I'll aim to kind of have 1 or 2 dB of clipping, whether it's on a kick or on the mix or on the drum bus, just because I feel like any more than that, you're kind of ruining the sound a little bit, and I'd rather kind of readjust my gain staging or go back into the mix itself. Maybe just try not to clip as much to try and get so loud. It just really depends, and I always hate to say to people that it depends, but it is so kind of true. Everything is, source dependent, and what is going into the clipper and what isn't. So, again, you just really have to play around. So at the moment, I've just got it in the default mode. What we're going to do is I'm just going to play the drums. It's on the drum bus currently, as you can see. I've just got it last in the chain on the drum bus, and I'm just going to play it in the default mode. Then I'm going to bypass it on this feature here, and we're not going to hear a difference just yet, but let's just hear what this sounds like on the drum bus with this plugin engaged and then not engaged. And as I thought, no clipping is happening. You can see that it's hitting quite high. You can see like the peaks of that drum bus is high. So in this case, I am going to bring it up here just because of the gain staging. There is, as I said, a lot of volume into it. Let's actually just play around with this plugin on the drum bus and just see kind of what we can do with it, and just play around. Then we'll A/B and have some fun. Now, straight away, what's really cool is I noticed that when I bypass the plugin, the drums do seem to have less energy. And that's probably because of the gold feature and the alchemy feature they've put into this plugin, which is just crazy, crazy good. And other clippers don't have that. And that's why I really do love Gold Clip. I did notice that the energy, the perceived loudness, it felt more forward, the transients, the attack, even though I was shaving off and clipping off those transients, it still felt like that the signal had even more transient in it, and it was like more controlled, more attackive. Kind of the perceived volume, the actual LUFS wasn't changing. It was the same volume because I gain matched it going in and going out, yet it was louder to my ears, which is what we call perceived loudness. What we can really do with that is we can really play around and kind of carve out the drum sound, carve how we want to do it on the drum bus without losing voltage going to the mix bus. And that is, super technical when we talk about gain staging and stuff. Again, it's such a crazy tool to be able to have because it just means that we can really push things kind of going into the mix bus, but not actually pushing the voltage of the mix bus, giving us more flexibility on the overall mix. Now, I know that was a lot of talking, but I think it's really important to kind of express how great that feature is in general. You saw I didn't use the box tone yet, but I did go for a hard clip. Now, soft clip to me introduces more saturation and it has more of a clipping kind of sound. Hard clip to me is more transparent. When it comes down to transient things where I want things to be a bit more transparent and I don't want, that clipping sound, I usually will go for hard clip. But let's again play around with the different style of clippers and the different gold, options that we've got and see. You'll also notice when I added this alchemy in, especially on that snare hit, it kind of rounded off the snare. Here's an example. Let's just play it again. I'm going to drive up the alchemy and really listen to the snare. It's subtle, but you heard there, like the snare wasn't as sharp. It was like it had kind of softened the high end of the snare. So again, we're like tonal shaping plus clipping all in one plugin, which is really cool. Now let's play around with the actual gold styles and see what we've got. That feature isn't making too much of a difference on the box tone. Now let's try the gold styles. Now that changes a lot. When I go from modern to classic, suddenly there feels like there's more kind of low mid kind of going on. Again, I don't know the ins and outs, but that's just what I'm getting from these drums. Personally, I prefer it on modern. It just feels more cleaner to me. Of course, I've got the gold all the way up just to show what that is doing, but you know, pull it down just a little bit. I kind of, with plugins in general, I push them and then I put them down just a little bit, and then I've kind of got it about where I want it. So that's kind of gold clip in general on the drum bus. What's really cool that they've done, we've also got gold clip but for track as well. So if we go to our kick drum, we can hear it here. Now what we can do is we can go to gold clip on track, and we can now just focus the clipping on the individual parts of the drums. Sometimes I'll clip individual parts of the drums just to control the transient if I'm having a problem, let's say with just a kick or just a snare. Other times I won't do that if it feels right, and I'll just do some overall clipping on the drum bus, again just to shape that before it hits the mix bus. But let's just try this out on the gold clip track on the kick only. See, when I put that on modern on the gold, it added more weight to the kick drum as well. So again, it depends if you like that. It depends if you feel like we need it. We do still have the gold clip on the drum bus. Let's take that off for now so we don't have that, and let's just try that again with nothing on the mix bus as far as clipping goes. So this is just on the kick. You know, when I turn that off, it loses so much kind of thickness to the kick. So let's have it off, and then we're going to turn it on halfway through. So it's a really cool tool just to kind of shape the way that you want the kicks to be in this example. Again, it just, you know, I'm doing 1.5 dB of clipping. I try and keep the clipping quite kind of modest. I don't want to do too much. As I said earlier, if you do too much, it can just cause kind of problems within the mix itself, you know, more kind of saturated, or it just can sound a bit kind of flat. So I kind of do like to keep everything to a minimum. Sometimes there will be plugins where I'll go absolutely crazy, but when it comes down to clipping, usually I'm doing kind of max between 1 and 3 dB only. Any more than that, I think can cause problems. But you know, you've got to try it yourself, see what works for you. Now, if we just play around with the gold, again, classic, and just try this one again, I'm just going to pull this all the way up just so we can kind of just, you know, emphasize what these are sounding like within the kick on its own. Interesting, when I go from modern to classic, it suddenly has a different low end character. To me, it sounds better on the modern. It's not allowing that low end kind of coming into the actual sample itself. And you can see kind of on the shape, the way that it's kind of, you know, small on the modern, more thick on the classic, meaning that they're allowing more low end to pass as well. Again, I do have the gold all the way up on purpose to emphasize this for the demonstrational purposes. Usually I'd probably have it around kind of here, but let's just keep it back on full at the moment, and let's go back to modern and just hear it. It really does add that perceived loudness. And, you know, as I said, that's kind of what clipping is for. It's to shave the transients, add perceived loudness with their gold feature, and, you know, get tracks sounding just banging. And I feel like Gold Clip just does that for me. So again, you saw there, I was using it on kicks, I was using it on the drum bass, and you know, I may also use it on the mix bus as well sometimes, but just usually speaking, I'm always going to be using it on transient heavy stuff, more so than stuff where it, you know, it doesn't have much transients in. And that's because clipping to me is to control, shave off transients. And if you've got like a piano and there's not really kind of heavy transients, then I wouldn't really go for a clipper on something like that, but I'll definitely use it on drums. So I like that. That's Gold Clip on the track, and let's see what they sound like with them both running at the same time. You know, to me, that makes a world of difference. It's subtle, but it's like my peaks are kind of being reduced, yet it's not changing in volume level. You know, I'm controlling the kick before it hits the drum bus, and then I'm doing some more clipping, as you can see on the drum bus as well. And then that is then feeding the mix bus. So that's 2 rounds of clipping. You don't have to do it like this. You could do it, you know, either just on the kick or on the drum bus only, or both. You know, it just depends what works for you and what you like. But try both out. Definitely worth checking out Gold Clip if you haven't already. And that's it. That's my approach on how I clip drums in a mix. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and if you've got any questions about Gold Clip, put them in the comments below and I'll get back to all of you. Also, don't forget, I'm running an academy called Stokes Sounds Academy. That's now open, so if you want to join that, definitely check that out. I will leave a link at the top in the description below. So if you want to level up your mixing, then that is for you. That's it from me this week, and I'll see you again next week for another video.